At some point, someone told you that you were too quiet, or too in your head, or that you needed to come out of your shell, as if the shell was the problem, and not simply where you happen to do your best thinking. The world has a very clear picture of what a high-performing brain looks like. It is loud, it is fast, it dominates the room. And for a long time, yours did not look like that picture at all. Here is what neuroscience actually found when it looked directly inside the introvert brain. Not a quieter version of the extrovert brain, not a less developed one. A brain running a fundamentally different operating system, with specific structural advantages that only became visible once researchers stopped measuring introversion as a deficit and started measuring it as a design. And one of those findings, the one about how the introverted brain performs when the stakes are genuinely high, reversed what the field had assumed for decades. We will get there. In this video, we are going through every major scientific finding on introvert brain architecture, the wiring, the depth of processing, the emotional circuitry, and that reversal. Let's find out what your brain has actually been doing all along. The reward system. Inside the introvert brain, something specific is happening at the neurochemical level that has nothing to do with personality preferences or childhood shyness. It starts with dopamine, the brain's primary reward and motivation chemical, and a difference in how the introvert brain responds to it. Extrovert brains are highly sensitive to dopamine, external stimulation, social interaction, new environments, noise, activity, triggers strong dopamine release, and the extrovert brain responds powerfully to that reward signal. It seeks more of it. The more external input, the better the extrovert brain feels. Introvert brains use a different primary pathway. Research has identified that introverts rely more heavily on acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter linked to focused attention, long-term memory consolidation, and the satisfaction that comes from sustained thinking rather than external reward seeking. This is not a subtle difference. These are two distinct neurochemical reward systems producing two completely different definitions of what the brain finds satisfying. The extrovert brain is rewarded by breadth, more input, more people, more stimulation. The introvert brain is rewarded by depth, longer focus, richer internal processing, ideas that develop fully rather than quickly. This is why social situations feel draining rather than energizing for introverts. Not because something is wrong, but because the introvert brain's primary reward system is simply not being activated in the way that external environments activate it. The introvert brain is not running low. It is running on a different fuel entirely. And that fuel produces something specific: the prefrontal cortex. When researchers started directly comparing introvert and extrovert brain activity at rest, not during tasks, just sitting quietly doing nothing, they found something they did not fully expect. Introvert brains show measurably higher baseline activity in the prefrontal cortex, even when the person is at rest. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain responsible for planning, consequence modeling, self-monitoring, and delay of gratification. In introverts, it runs continuously, even in the absence of an immediate task demanding it. The acetylcholine pathway from Reveal 1 feeds directly into this. Where the extrovert brain defaults to an outward-facing awareness, scanning the environment for social and external cues, the introvert brain defaults to an inward-facing mode. It runs what researchers call inner simulation, continuous mental modeling of scenarios, outcomes, and consequences, running in the background at all times. In practice, this produces several measurable differences. Introverts make significantly fewer impulsive decisions under identical conditions to extroverts. They consider more variables before acting. They are more accurate on complex tasks that reward thinking before responding, rather than responding before thinking. And it produces something else, something that connects directly to creative output. Introverts have been found to have stronger and more detailed inner speech than extroverts, a more active, more structured internal monologue that processes information before it is spoken rather than while it is being spoken. This is why introverts are on average more precise in written communication than verbal. The writing gives the internal simulation time to complete before the words appear. Sensory processing. You have probably noticed that certain environments hit differently than they seem to hit other people. A loud restaurant feels genuinely louder. A crowded room feels genuinely more crowded. Bright lights, overlapping conversations, a full schedule with no gaps. Things that other people seem to move through without friction feel like they require active management. This is not sensitivity in the colloquial sense. Research has found that introvert brains process sensory information more thoroughly than extrovert brains, running incoming data through more neural pathways and at greater depth before a response is generated. A 2012 brain imaging study found that introverts showed significantly more blood flow in the frontal lobes during sensory processing tasks, the regions associated with planning and decision-making. The introvert brain does not just receive sensory input, it analyzes it more completely before moving on. This is why busy environments feel exhausting rather than energizing. The introvert brain is not overwhelmed because it is fragile. It is running more processing cycles on every piece of incoming information than the extrovert brain in the same room. It is doing more work per stimulus. The fatigue is the output of a more thorough system, not a less resilient one. If you have always found that you notice details in environments that others seem to walk straight past, that is the same mechanism. More processing per input produces more observations per environment. Now here is where this gets genuinely interesting. Because everything so far, the reward system, the prefrontal activity, the sensory depth, all of it feeds into a single situation that researchers tested directly. And the result was not what anyone predicted going in. The conventional assumption about introverts and high-stakes performance has always been straightforward. Extroverts are built for pressure. They thrive on the energy of observed performance, fast decisions, and external stimulation. Exactly what high-stakes situations produce. Introverts, the assumption goes, are at their best in quiet, controlled conditions. Put them in the spotlight under real pressure and they will underperform. Researchers designed a study specifically to test this. They placed introverts and extroverts into identical high-pressure performance conditions, timed, observed, with explicit stakes attached to the outcome. Then they measured cognitive accuracy throughout. The introverts outperformed. Not because they were less stressed, their physiological stress responses were equivalent, but their prefrontal cortex activity, that continuous analytical self-monitoring from Reveal 2, remained significantly higher throughout the high-pressure task, where the extrovert brain, flooded with the external stimulation of a high-stakes observed environment, showed measurable reduction in prefrontal cortex activity. The introvert brain maintained it. The very thing that makes social situations draining for introverts, deeper internal processing, stronger self-monitoring, continuous prefrontal engagement, is the same thing that keeps them analytically sharp precisely when the stakes are highest and everyone else's processing starts to degrade. The assumption was not just wrong, it was backwards. So here is what the full picture actually means. If you are an introvert who has spent your life in environments built for the other style, open offices, group brainstorms, always-on communication, meetings that replace the thinking time you needed, you have not been struggling because you are less equipped. You have been struggling because the environment was running against your brain's actual operating conditions. The quiet is not where you hide. The quiet is where your brain actually runs. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.